Ms. Burke, could you please remain standing? Could you state and spell your name for the record first?
Patricia Burke, B-U-R-K-E.
Thank you. Do you swear or affirm that the matters in which you're going to testify are the truth?
Yes.
You may proceed.
So my written testimony is a little longer than what I'm going to say because the health was already covered pretty well.
Thank you.
My name is Patricia Burke. I'm from Norfolk, Massachusetts. While the Commonwealth determines the cost to ratepayers for the Worcester National Grid Smart Meter Pilot Program, it's important to make sure that the ratepayers got what they paid for, which is an accurate, impartial analysis of the pilot to determine whether or not smart meters are a reasonable investment for Massachusetts. On August 16th of 2017, the Worcester Telegram and Gazette published an article by the Massachusetts State House News Service entitled, "Worcester Cited as an Example of a Power Grid That Isn't Stupid." Quote, "If your power goes off at your house, the only way you'd know right now is if you pick up the phone and call us," unquote, National Grid Massachusetts President Marcy Reed told policymakers from around the country Tuesday. A lot of people just assume in this day of technology, of course we know. Well, we don't. It's dumb grid. The exception is Worcester, where Reed said a pilot modernization project has allowed 11,000 customers to save $1.8 million over the last year of the pilot. Reed said that in Worcester, National Grid offered customers the ability to opt out of the pilot, and only 2% opted out. So I'm expressing 4 areas of concern. The first is the results reporting and the absence of impartial oversight. Smart meter pilot reports from NSTAR Eversource and Fitchburg Electric transparently tabulated how many participants they attempted to enroll and how many opted out. The previous 2 pilots did not support the conclusion that smart meters are a reasonable investment. Navigant and Marcy Reed reported that the Worcester pilot had a remarkable 98% retention rate. Page 134 of the Navigant report states that the pilot started in 2014 with a little over 11,000 customers, 11,184. It ended in 2016 with 10,361. The loss of over 800 accounts is a 13% and not a 2% attrition rate. But Navigant took the liberty of not counting retention until 2015, halfway through the 2-year pilot. And this was after 2 previous years of community turmoil and citizen opt-outs. And as Navigant reported, National Grid was still enrolling customers, and customers were leaving the pilot in the final year. The active recruitment statistics are not provided, but the pilot was experiencing a net loss. The analysis of the Worcester pilot took great liberties in how it depicted the variables of who chose a meter versus accepted a meter versus who opted out versus who refused a meter versus insinuating that an enormous number of participants moved or chose an alternative provider after they were auto-enrolled in the pilot. The Navigant report claims that 5% of customers offered an AMI meter declined to accept it at the onset of the pilot. This presumes that they knew that they received a smart meter and that they knew about the pilot. We have no way of knowing whether Worcester residents even knew that they had a meter or a choice. And in fact, at least 5,000 Worcester residents rejected the pilot before it started, which is 1/3 of 15,000 and not 5%. And an erroneous statistical assumption was made that throughout the pilot, choosing an alternative provider had nothing to do with objecting to the pilot or with opposition to National Grid. Those statistics were not counted. National Grid was also allowed to backfill for participants who opted out by installing a smart meter on the home of another unsuspecting Worcester resident. And this is why the approved pilot map had to be expanded to cover such a large portion of the city. The number of installations appears to be at least greater than 16,000, but it has not been disclosed. The actual number of installations and meter refusals for the pilot can be easily audited through work invoices. The unqualified 98 retention rate claim is misleading and inaccurate, and it gets worse. On page 44, Navigant states there were a total of 2,504 active customers in the pilot at the end of 2016. 2,504 is nowhere near 11,000. In the Navigant report, the percentage of active customers was not calculated until after the final months of 2016. Remember that new recruits were being added in the final months. An active participant is identified as a customer who visited the website even once. This includes participants who were enticed by a clickbait promise of a Dunkin' Donuts gift card or a free iPad, but then took no further action. Even with this maneuver, as far as the public record reveals, only 25% of the participants did anything to give any indication that they even knew that they were in the pilot, unless there are other dynamics that the public is not aware of. Of the 25% who were active, we don't know what percentage of these customers truly understood the pilot or its implications. For example, we don't know how many visited the website twice, but did nothing else. 75% of now closer to 10,000 participants who did not visit the website did not accept any technology. And we don't know if those who had the in-home monitoring devices were actually using them, just about 1,000 people. So the unqualified 98% retention rate claim, especially when associated with the implication that the pilot had 11,000 participants, is ridiculous. We do not know if there were individuals recruited for this pilot who did not speak English and whose civil rights may have been violated. I do not know how or why it was legal for the utility to change a customer's rate structure and override their privacy without their informed consent. I do not know how it was that community leaders had the authority or the right to enroll the community in human experimentation. Non-consenting, non-benefiting, non-participating residents had no choice regarding their exposure to radio frequencies emitted by the meter mesh network and the experimental WiMAX antennas. National Grid and Itron covertly snuck smart meters on 5,000 homes and businesses in an early field trial, apparently without detection, before the pilot was even approved by the Department of Public Utilities. Itron reportedly donated the 5,000 meters in exchange for data. Was this fair to residents, and how was this authorized? National Grid has unsurprisingly already announced its intention to use Itron for statewide smart meter deployment. I know that extending the pilot until the Massachusetts Department of Public Utilities makes a decision about grid modernization ensures that customers who did not know that they were in the pilot would not find out when their electricity rates would suddenly increase as the pilot ended. This is because participants who were in the pilot received lower electricity rates for every hour of every day, except the days when a critical peak period was called during the summer. Their overnight and weekend hours were less expensive than the daytime rates. The claims of cost savings of this pilot must be very clearly examined, because even the passive customers had savings. Unless National Grid intends to lower rates when smart meters are installed, the fact that customers expressed a desire to remain in the program should be further investigated. They weren't asked if they wanted to pay for it. Unlike the Worcester pilot, there are no Dunkin' Donuts gift cards or free iPads budgeted into the grid modernization plans submitted by the utilities, and the grid modernization plans are not free. The pilot wasn't free either, but it was presented to the community as if it was free. Had participants been told that they were being surcharged for the pilot, some portion of ratepayers may have elected not to support the expenditure. This included the Sustainability Hub, which was also known as the Propaganda Pub, the booths of students at farmers markets, the newspaper and radio ads, and other community outreach attributed to the pilot. The National Grid Clifton Park, New York smart meter pilot is underway. It involves 14,000 meters. It's budgeted for 3 years for $26 million. And it is also reported to be behind schedule already. The 2-year Worcester pilot was behind schedule and over budget, reportedly reaching $60 million in expenses by the 2015 filing at the halfway mark once the pricing plans were in effect. This is 2.5 times more costly than the New York pilot. Despite the fees paid to Navigant, no complete, transparent, simple, final cost-benefit analysis has been provided for the Worcester pilot program, which involved both off-book and on-book expenses. This docket, MADPU 1828, which is heavily redacted, is focused on how much the ratepayers will be charged for the pilot and the interim extension. The docket does not provide a summary of the cumulative cost to date. If the books are cooked to give the impression that the pilot cost less than it did, it is crucial to also have an additional complete accounting to inform decision makers and ratepayers. Navigant reported that 69% of customers rated their satisfaction as at least 5 out of a 7-point scale, and this statistic has been reported nationally and internationally. But this analysis only involved 615 surveys and not 11,000 participants. So who filled out the surveys? In 2013, when establishing an invitation list for its initial 2-day Green to Growth Summit, National Grid stated in a Department of Energy report that they obtained the names of individuals who would be supportive of the utility's agenda. The guest list included politicians and community partners, as well as staff from the Department of Public Utilities. Smart meters were never mentioned at the Green to Growth Summit. It is an example of a significant off-book expense, as well as a manipulative exercise in the process of obtaining community consent. It is not known how many of those individuals who were predisposed to the utility's agenda were also in the pilot and completing the glowing final evaluation questionnaires, but we do know that National Grid did have its own employees in the pilot because one of them wrote an editorial for the Telegram and Gazette. The Navigant report states that National Grid focused on early adopters and easy installs when initially testing equipment installations. The reports of customer satisfaction rates at the end of the pilot may mirror the targeted efforts at the start of the program to ensure a pilot that delivered a specific result. Throughout the Navigant analysis, the phrase appears and refers to the number of customers used in this particular analysis, not the total number of customers in each technology price group. In how many of its interpretations did Navigant choose which accounts to include and which accounts to exclude? The extent to which the pilot was randomized and representative of a full deployment in National Grid's service territory requires further investigation. The highest reductions in peak loads were reported in the categories of customers who were required to have central air, high-speed internet, and/or a load control device, such as a pool pump override switch. The peak event impacts for the groups that included central air appear to be estimated based on a total of only 30 accounts. As NSTAR Eversource testified, air conditioners offer the greatest opportunity for residential load reductions, but the estimated central air conditioning penetration in Eversource's territory is only approximately 38% for 2 to 3 months of the year. Moreover, residential appliance data suggests that there's little discretionary load beyond the air conditioner. 5 different customer load profiles were utilized by National Grid to customize communication to the pilot participants, and I'm shortening my testimony a little bit here. There were the 9-to-5ers, the late-nighters, the double peakers, all of whom had low daily usage. And then the other two categories of the even keels and the homebodies. And these are people who had electricity use during the day. National Grid gathered personal information about a customer's usage to tailor their marketing, but they did not provide a breakdown of how many individuals in the pilot were at home when the majority of the peak events were called, which had the higher rates. What the pilot analysis did not reveal is how many of the customers who chose to participate in the pilot in the first place were not home during the day. These are the customers who will experience the least impact and inconvenience due to time of use and critical peak period tariffs. The final report for the pilot was hidden from public scrutiny on a DPU website under a 2010 docket, while the other two smart meter pilot program reports are not posted on this particular docket, which is DPU 10-82. The DPU website contains no search function capabilities. The claim that the pilot was co-created with the community is curious at best when much of the pilot was hidden from view and operating behind closed doors. The residents were in the dark. The question remains, what does the pilot imply for the grid modernization proceeding and the potential for full deployment of smart meters? Both Kentucky and New Mexico regulators recently rejected smart meters. PG&E, which is Pacific Gas and Electric in California, just filed its compliance report for 2017 recently. In contrast to reports of remarkable savings from the Worcester pilot, the California 2017 filing found no energy savings from smart meters, 0 energy savings. The results claims for the Worcester pilot should be independently audited. A second concern about the pilot is health and the illusion of customer choice. I'm shortening my testimony from my written testimony. Smart meters were never pre-market safety tested, despite the fact that National Grid believes that its smart meters are safe. National Grid did not surcharge the customers in the pilot who declined the meter, as it plans to do in its statewide deployment. National Grid used the pilot to promote its contrived commitment to customer choice. In fact, customers were not given the choice of whether or not to accept a smart meter. They were auto-enrolled in the pilot. And despite National Grid disingenuously publicizing its commitment to customer choice and a free opt-out in the pilot, National Grid is already surcharging medically vulnerable residents for an installation fee and a monthly surcharge for those who requested to opt out of the first generation of AMR meters. I believe this is Docket 1383 or 1384. Yet National Grid's electronic radio off opt-out meter does not address the dirty electricity introduced onto the building wiring by the smart meter. While Eversource has reportedly provided no consideration for requests for an opt-out meter, the National Grid tariff is a form of discrimination based on a medical condition. To protect the health of vulnerable residents, a mechanical analog meter is required, but opting out from a transmitting meter does not protect residents from neighboring meters, especially in multifamily dwellings. The pilot could have investigated these issues. The third issue with the pilot is the question of power quality, which also pertains to health. Smart meters may not be modernizing the grid at all. Smart meters may be contaminating the grid. Testimony was recently given in an Arizona utility proceeding regarding pollution of the 60 Hz cycle due to the switch mode power supply in wireless utility meters. In his expert testimony in 2017 in Arizona, Dr. Sam Milham stated, "Dirty electricity or dirty power are terms coined by electric utilities to describe electrical pollution consisting of high-frequency voltage transients and harmonics riding on the 50 to 60 Hertz waveform and contaminating the electricity delivered." I'm shortening this a little bit. Smart meters are electronic devices which replace the electromechanical analog meters used to measure electric power consumption for billing purposes. The smart meters have circuitry to measure power consumption and a microwave transmitter to send this information to the utility. The health effects of microwave exposures are well known. All transmitters, including the microwave transmitters in smart meters, operate on direct current. The smart meters contain a switch mode power supply, SMPS, which changes the utility's 60 Hz alternating current to direct current. Because it is at the front end of a building's wiring, the dirty electricity from the smart meter's switch mode power supply has a gateway into that building's wiring and also into the earth via the house ground. The house wiring acts as an antenna, and the field's capacitively coupled to the body through the air within 6 to 8 feet of the house wiring or extension cords plugged into the outlets. I'm shortening again. It is my professional opinion that smart meters are a public health hazard. As Dr. Milham explains, it appears that radio frequency transmissions are being conducted along house wiring and then rereading into the home. In readings taken in homes in Massachusetts by power quality expert Dave Stetzer in 2013, high voltage transients were observed riding on the 60 Hz cycle. In one home, the plumbing was creating unsafe contact current because the transients were also riding on the copper plumbing pipes and faucets. The problem of having an electric grid acting as an antenna for the high frequency voltage transients is made worse by the introduction of smart meters. Polluted power quality affects all customers who share the same transformer. Energy efficient devices including solar inverters, energy efficient lighting, variable speed motors, customer electronics, dimmer switches, and wireless meters are sources of high voltage transients. Health vulnerable homeowners seeking to protect themselves from radio frequencies in the air and on the wires have been forced to move, turn their power off at night, sleep in Faraday cages, buy costly filtering equipment and shielding, with various levels of success. Sweden has developed and implemented strategies for protecting the homes of some of the electrosanitized population and has created white zones and social service supports. Given reports of harm from smart meter deployment in other states, including California and Maine, the Worcester pilot could have incorporated monitoring for power quality with full disclosure to residents, informed consent, and independent investigation of health complaints. Instead, National Grid and the Department of Public Utilities relied on a liar-for-hire tobacco scientist for expert health testimony to override health concerns. In addition, Worcester's Department of Health published an embarrassing smart meter health report. The city administration sided with the utility against the residents. This is not rocket science. While the power quality is being monitored independently, a customer can wear a heart monitor or sleep monitor, and the readings can be compared. Sleep deprivation is a form of torture, and it is prohibited by international human rights law. Sleep-deprived ratepayers endanger the safety of others, for example, while driving. They have lowered performance, and they develop chronic adverse health conditions that can be very expensive to manage and treat. The unacknowledged cost of polluted electricity are being shifted onto the healthcare system and the social sector. This relationship between pulse frequencies on the grid and biological effects has already been privately investigated and confirmed by a number of individuals in Massachusetts and elsewhere, including heart rate disruption demonstrated by Warren Woodward in Arizona. We are apparently replacing fossil fuel pollution with another form of contamination, with radio waves in the airwaves that also ride on wires. Dirty electricity damages equipment, appliances, human health, and the environment. This cannot be swept under the rug. We are breaking our own hearts. Most people do not contact their utility company when they experience the onset of an illness, especially if they don't know that their power quality has been polluted. By looking at medical records and comparing them to wireless AMR installations in Massachusetts, an epidemiology pattern may emerge concerning the onset of many chronic health conditions, ranging from anxiety to MCS to fatalities from heart attacks and sudden infant death syndrome. If autism disorders are linked to the poor quality of the mother's sleeping environment during gestation, the implications are staggering. If Alzheimer's and other neurological illnesses are directly linked to electrical disturbances in the cell walls, as has been indicated by Dr. Martin Paul's work, we are destroying the quality of life at both ends of the age spectrum, from childhood autism to Alzheimer's disease. Given that some portion of patients with chronic health conditions, including autism, MS, Lyme, and multiple chemical sensitivity, show remarkable improvement in a pure, clean, electrosanitized environment, it is unwise to continue with community-wide ubiquitous exposure in association with this access to essential services of heat, electricity, and water. Until the technology can be deployed safely for all customers, smart meter and smart grid deployment should be halted. In addition, meter manufacturers have failed to accurately report the incident of electrical issues and fires, including fatalities, to decision makers, ratepayers, and investors. When the meter is mounted outside the home and the fire starts on the exterior walls, interior smoke alarms are ineffective. The meters are also vulnerable to electromagnetic pulses, which could cripple the grid, and to hacking. The potential safety and health liabilities for smart meter deployments are staggering. In a state with such significant scientific resources, I believe that ratepayers in Massachusetts would expect that we would consult someone other than mercenary liar-for-hire tobacco scientist Peter Wahlberg regarding human health and safety. And I have some resources here about Peter Wahlberg. I'm shortening this a little. The fourth unreported result of the Worcester pilot program is that many residents do not want microwave towers and antennas near their homes. The public narrative of the pilot has suppressed the truth about the impact of those living near the Cooks Pond substation. In 2013, Bill Jones of National Grid was so frustrated by the community opposition to the pilot that he wrote an article for IEEE calling for a coordinated industry response. The Smart Grid Consumer Collaborative was established in the same vein as the corrupted Tobacco Institute. The nonprofit industry front group has now morphed into the Smart Energy Consumer Collaborative. The tobacco scientist from Massachusetts, Peter Wahlberg, is the smart meter health expert for the group. So in conclusion, this is a quote from Dr. Allison Wilson, who's the co-founder and science director of the Bioscience Research Project. Science absolutely requires independence and integrity. Without them, science ceases to be science. It becomes a tool to manipulate people. The Worcester National Grid Smart Meter Pilot Program fires a warning shot across the bow of the future of smart cities, big data, 5G, and the Internet of Things, because the pilot appears to have been a foregone conclusion delivered by those who had the data. It demonstrates that data can be manipulated to support a predetermined outcome. According to National Grid, smart meters included in its grid modernization plans are necessary for implementing time-of-use billing. They aren't. Time-of-use data can be stored at the home and then collected for billing purposes only. Those customers who desire to have a home energy monitor can do so without the utility company consuming energy while it's collecting, analyzing, and storing the data, as well as misrepresenting it in this case. But that assumes that the time-of-use billing is necessary and desirable. Proponents of electric vehicles are working to ensure that electric vehicle owners can have workplace charging during the day to promote EV adoption, while a senior at home with a health aide, a stay-at-home parent, or a third shift worker will be surcharged one way or another. The grid operator ISO New England uses the annual peak hour of energy to calculate what each utility in the region pays for the coming year. On those days, Green Mountain Power in Vermont asked its customers to reduce their electricity use from 4 to 7 for 2 days without compromising safety or comfort. They educated their customers, and they may have saved billions of dollars. Massachusetts could have done the same. What the Worcester pilot did not test is whether customer education can be used to create awareness without the necessity of costly infrastructure that introduces an invisible form of pollution and unnecessary risks into the lives of Massachusetts residents. The consequence of deploying unsafe infrastructure is that it must be replaced, and this results in more profit for the utility companies unless they are held accountable for providing reasonable evidence that the technology is safe. Testimony by a tobacco scientist regarding health, financed by ratepayers, is not reasonable. The pilot was designed to entice, bribe, and reward customers, implying that they would not otherwise be engaged around energy savings, and assuming that the pricing and the rewards were responsible for any reported desired outcomes. This may be an outdated and an ill-informed assumption, but it is clearly designed to validate investment in billions of dollars of infrastructure investment for the investor-owned utility. The goal of the pilot was not to simply study consumer behavior or to listen, test, and learn. The goal was to drive the community through a series of boundary violations to paint a picture of a specific outcome. The smart grid is designed to monetize the data about electricity customers. National Grid President Marcy Reed said that the grid isn't just plain stupid, but manipulating earnest consumers into believing that they are practicing conservation while diverting resources away from other, more reasonable options. And unleashing unfathomable harm is really, really stupid. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Burke.
I have copies for you too. I didn't mail them.
Thank you.
Oh, I can give you my original. And I'm also submitting testimony for Deborah Moore. Are you Melissa? Yeah. Oh, I must have been able to get it for you. I think there's 2 there.
If there's 2 copies, I'm happy to provide one too.
Okay, I can. Oh, okay, that would be fine.
You can hang on to your original. At this time, I'd like to ask, are there any additional members of the public who wish to be heard today? Okay, seeing a negative response, I'd like to thank the members of the public who did come in and offer their testimony today. At this point in time, if there are no further matters, I'm going to go ahead and adjourn the public hearing. I think we'll take a brief recess before moving on to the procedural conference. So we'll go off the record.